Coming up on Lawmakers, a move to place a portrait of Coretta Scott King in the Capitol hits a roadblock. Advance Directive legislation is amended to create a website for healthcare decisions. And a conversation with Tom Crawford of CapitolImpact.com about the session thus far. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening, everyone. There was little action in the House or Senate today as the legislature heads into another week-long recess. This one for spring break.
We'll take a look back at this week under the Gold Dome, but our lead story tonight, controversy over a committee maneuver. Another setback for legislation to place a portrait of Coretta Scott King next to her husband's in the state capitol. Lawmaker Sandra Parrish joins us with the latest.
In White House Resolution 376 by Representative Roberta Abdul-Salaam was scheduled to be heard early this morning in the House Special Rules Committee, but she was late and the meeting adjourned as she was walking in the room. Now, with just 7 legislative days left, it remains to be seen if the measure will pass this year.
As everybody is a witness, traffic was horrible this morning.
Representative Abdul-Salaam says she thinks there is more to the fact that her resolution to place Mrs. King's portrait by her husband is still stuck in committee, besides her tardiness today and her absence to the last meeting due to illness.
Unfortunately, what I think is going on is what's been going on since January 30th, 2006. There is no real genuine interest or desire to do the right thing. If there were, it would have already been done. If there were, we wouldn't have to do a bill. If there were, we wouldn't be here a year later still talking about trying to get this done.
This is the 4th meeting we've attempted to have on this bill. The last meeting about 2 weeks ago we held, and the author didn't show up whatsoever. Today she didn't make any telephone calls to let us know, so we went ahead and adjourned the meeting. Once the meeting is adjourned, we're on to do other things.
Committee Chair Representative Calvin Hill says he thinks the measure is a good one, but the committee must still hear the merits of the resolution.
It's a very, very significant honor, and the question is not, is Mrs. King a wonderful person? Was she not a continuation in the legacy of her husband? But did she do something on her own merits as a significant leader?
From the time that Dr. King died, she picked up the mantle and she carried the work forward and she kept it going. And she did many things that he was not alive to do.
And Representative Hill says his committee is still willing to hear the presentation from Representative Abdul-Salaam. In a related story, another resolution by Representative Tyrone Brooks to place portraits of Rosa Parks and several other civil rights leaders in the Capitol is apparently dead for the session after it failed to make it to the House floor on Crossover Day earlier this week. Reporting from the state Capitol, I'm Sandra Parrish for Lawmakers.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Legislation that provides for an advance directive for health care passed the Senate today. Senator Seth Harp took the well to answer a few funding questions on House Bill 24, known as the Georgia Advance Directive for Health Care Act.
Is this going to reduce costs? Is this going to increase a burden in cost?
Senator, this bill is going to set in place a methodology for people to make end-of-life decisions that common sense will require. They do not need an attorney. They can do it in any number of ways. It's plain English. It's not the gibberish that exists in the present living wills and other the medical power of attorney. This is plain sense. When you read the languages of the package, if anything, it should greatly reduce and it should greatly facilitate individuals making end-of-life decisions.
Now, Senator Judson Hill then presented a substitute to the bill, which sets up a website to help answer consumer questions about health care costs and quality.
What this amendment does to the underlying bill, it provides the family the opportunity to actually get the best information, so when the family's making medical decisions, they'll have that information available to them so they can make a wise, informed medical choice. They can make a choice about physicians and facilities. They can make a choice about all sorts of things. Separately, the amendment provides the consumers, the people we represent, it actually, for the first time ever, gets them out of the dark. We actually don't give them information, access to information on quality and price information in prescription drug comparisons. This amendment, 1, requires hospitals, ambulatory surgery centers, nursing home and rehabilitation facilities in Georgia to report to the Department of Community Health in the way that the DCH determines, and that they would produce a website and that the website would have quality and cost information.
Now, House Bill 24 passed 51-0 with the Hill Amendment and now goes back to the House.
Well, House business today consisted of approving Senate changes to the Georgia Code. Although this is done every year to correct errors and omissions in state laws, Representative Dan Lackley wanted to know whether marking deleted sections as reserved paves the way to insert frivolous laws in their places.
To my friend Representative Lackley, I stand here surprised and somewhat embarrassed to have to explain this to you after your long tenure in the House.
Feel free, others have before you.
You must recognize that we have various sections of the code. They're called titles. And we have titles numbered as Title 1 through Title 54, I believe it is, of our 53 of our code. And what you have, Representative Lackey, each one of these sections refers to a specific title of the code. And if we don't have anything being changed, it is reserved for that reason, so we have continuity of the numbering in chronological order.
Thank you so much for shedding that knowledge on me, sharing the knowledge with me.
Be careful how you pronounce that.
All three of those code section revisions received final passage in the House today and are set to be corrected in the Georgia Code.
The Senate passed anti-dogfighting legislation for the second time this session. Senator Chip Rogers presented a substitute to House Bill 366, which includes language from a Senate bill that is already sitting in the House. Senator Rogers explains his substitute and the original details of House Bill 366.
It simply allows a person who's engaged in the raising of a dog that is to be trained to help persons that are have problems with seeing, hearing, and disabled persons, to allow those dogs to be trained in a manner, or to allow those dogs to be raised in a manner, and those persons be given the same right that a person who's actually training one of those dogs. Obviously, some of these dogs need to be, as they're growing up, learn what they're going to do later in life. This bill also provided, I'll be honest with you, a vehicle to attach our dogfighting legislation that we've passed through this Senate the last 2 years, and we hope that this will give us an opportunity to move it through the House as well.
House Bill 366 passed 53-0 with the Rogers substitute and now goes back to the House. A bill that changes the number of vessel pilots in Georgia ports was debated on the floor of the Senate yesterday but did not come to a vote until today. A substitute to House Bill 132 from Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson delayed the voting, but it had no opposition when passing the Senate today.
The number of river pilots that are licensed by the state is set by statute. Due to the increased traffic at Savannah ports and in the Brunswick ports, the harbor pilots have requested that that number be increased. The city councils who regulate them, the ports authority who oversees them, and customers pay for it have all signed off on it. We're going from 17 to 21 in the port of Savannah and 6 to 8 in the port of Brunswick. Attached to on the floor substitute is the sunken boat bill that we've had on the floor, another one that passed unanimously, non-controversial, and unfortunately we're at the time of the year that we need to try and find any way we can to pass our legislation. I'd ask you to support the floor substitute, which means you need to defeat the House bill that's on the floor.
Again, that was yesterday, and as Senator Johnson mentioned, the language in his substitute was added on to give this abandoned vessel measure a better chance of passing this year.
Well, as the legislature prepares to recess for the next week, House Speaker Glenn Richardson went to the well this morning to urge his colleagues to put their official duties in perspective.
We're riding down the road, and in this great country that we live in, there were war protesters out on the street. And I thought, you know, isn't this a great country? You can stand out, hold up signs and say peace, not war. And this gentleman standing there looked like to me, he was maybe not quite the age of my friend I'm going to tell you about that served in Iraq in the first Gulf War. But he had a sign that says, no more war, N-I-R-A-N. The war is not in Iran, it's in Iraq. And then I thought of my friend who I visited this week, Stacy Taylor. I grew up with him. I sat with him this week. He has leukemia. And the doctors have told him that there's not much they can do. And he told me that he was blessed to be able to tell his wife and boys and family goodbye and spend some time with them. I wish the best for you and your family. I wanted to take a moment to say that to you. Put this in perspective. Put it behind you. It's insignificant right now. Go enjoy the time with your families. Thank you.
Now, as March winds down, the Senate is going into recess. This gives us a chance to take a look at recent important legislation with our weekly wrap-up. Jesse Freeman joins us now with this week's edition. Jesse.
David, somebody once said that March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb. Whoever said that wasn't a member of the Georgia General Assembly. The month that began with a 2-week break ended with a relative flurry of legislation, mostly on crossover day. Tuesday marked the deadline for bills to pass out of their House of Origin or be lost for the session. One such bill was Speaker Glenn Richardson's plan to reform the peach care system.
We ran into a jam. We were ensuring anybody and everybody that could get on the line and get signed up. By changing the threshold, it makes this issue unfortunately partisan.
The House also passed its version of the FY07 amended budget on Tuesday for the second time. They warned the Senate they were serious about their spending projects.
We are putting this budget's money where the Senate's mouth is.
The Senate argued over the implementation of infrastructure development districts in which developers could levy taxes.
It may not be the right tool for every application, but it should be one of the tools available.
The heavy-handed move that we just saw here a few minutes ago with tabling one of my members' bills and coupling this bill with another member's bill in order to try to get it passed, I find unconscionable.
Caught up in the battle was a measure to introduce entities that could develop their own planning and zoning laws called townships.
This is a political process, and I look forward to continuing to work in a bipartisan way to pass it.
Back in the House, a measure to reintroduce the payday lending industry into Georgia was defeated.
This is not good legislation, and we ought not to be putting this legislation on our constituents.
And finally, Governor Perdue recognized the NCAA. The men's basketball Final Four will be held in Atlanta this weekend.
It's a huge, not only fun, not only excitement, but a great economic impact, as you know, for our state and our city.
On Wednesday, Senate members responded to the House with their version of the budget. They say they have shaved off some of the House's pet spending projects.
The bill that will come out of the committee is a 5-page bill dealing only with the critical needs of state government.
And the House passed a revision to mandates that would have lowered class sizes in high schools.
And year after year we've come in this General Assembly and we've not done it. We've found a reason to stop it, and we're doing it again. We're doing it at a time that we're telling our people we have plenty of money.
Both chambers slowed down considerably by Thursday. The House debated which drugs optometrists should be allowed to prescribe.
Chairman Earhart did tell me that he was going to probably open it wide open, and I'm going not in my committee.
And the Senate revised guidelines for saltwater fishing guides.
And April will begin much like March. The General Assembly will take off the first week of the month for spring break. Reporting from the Capitol, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Great story, Jesse, and for all of us at Lawmakers, we'd like to say happy birthday.
Thank you, David.
Well, this session has been marked by debate about how to fund the Peach Care insurance program covering children of the working poor. Today, I met a woman who has been the assistant to the rector at St. Luke's Episcopal Church for the past 19 years. The single mother said the significance of Peach Care became especially evident when her youngest daughter was recently injured.
It was a freak accident. She was actually at church in a parking lot, and she went to hug a friend, and she hit a van door. So it was a freak accident. You know, you can't stop your children from hugging other kids. So it was one of those things you just don't plan on.
14-year-old Kara is covered by Peach Care, so the monthly premiums her mother pays covered her broken hand.
Peach Care now it's $44 a month, so which is affordable for me. The church does offer me full coverage, medical and dental, and they're working on trying to get full coverage for families. It's just, of course, the cost is expensive. And for me to actually buy insurance for my children would be over $300 a month, and that's a big dent in my budget.
Without the benefit of health insurance, many children of the working poor wind up getting their health care in the emergency room. Mrs. MacArthur didn't select this option when her daughters were uninsured.
I didn't take them to get checkups. I just didn't bring them. When they got sick, I used herbs. I'm just really into health and natural foods. I just used herbs, which was great, but I couldn't go to the regular checkups and vision, dental. You know, that just didn't exist. Just didn't do it. Before, I couldn't bring them to the dentist at all. And Sports, my daughters are real active. I can put them in sports and not worry about them breaking anything, because if they were injured, I'd be wiped out, or I'd be in a crisis. I'd be in a financial crisis because I couldn't afford medical bills.
The MacArthur girls are growing up healthy, but child advocates say not all kids are so lucky.
In the past, you know, when we have had administrative changes that have caused some children to drop off Medicaid, we've seen all kinds of issues with children's health. You know, children not getting asthma medication that they need, children who were doing well in school with the kinds of medications that they needed for attention deficit disorder, suddenly having major problems and getting expelled from school again.
Mrs. MacArthur says she's concerned about whether she will continue to qualify for Peach Care if House Bill 340 gets final passage and the income threshold goes down. The Department of Community Health today declined to comment on the legislation, but earlier in the session, a DCH director said the plan would not solve the funding shortfall.
It's a small portion of the total problem. It's probably in the neighborhood of 10% of the total deficit.
But Mrs. MacArthur says the program makes a real difference on the finances of her family and others with low incomes.
As a state, we should have a moral budget. You know, maybe, I know things are tight, I don't know, you know, but I think it's a moral budget where children should come first, regardless of the situation of the parents or why the parents are low income or what. I think that our children should come first, and because they don't have a voice. And that's why I want to speak out for them, I just want to speak out for the children and make sure they're taken care of.
And Wandy and I had a chance to sit down earlier today with Tom Crawford, national editor of CapitolImpact.com. We began by discussing the differences in the House and Senate versions of the 07 amended budget.
You've got a lot of disagreement between the House and the Senate, I guess on a philosophical level, as to whether in this revised or adjusted budget they ought to be putting money in there for things like the Tour de Georgia bike race and the Infantry Museum in Columbus and the Georgia Golf Hall of Fame. The Senate leadership says, no, let's wait and debate those fully when we take up the budget for next year. Let's just leave them out of the supplemental budget. Let's make this as simple as we can and try to save a little money and go ahead and pass it. Both of them very debatable sides of the issue, but it's caused a real breakdown in getting a budget approved. And as you know, we're here into April almost, and still no end in sight to this session.
The Senate has brought up all these conservative values that they want to put into the 07 supplemental. Have they mentioned much about carrying that over into the 08 budget? Is it going to be the same philosophy?
Well, I don't know that it's going to be the same philosophy. We were talking with Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle, and he mentioned that not everything that the House necessarily wanted to put in, the Senate would agree to put in, even if they wait until next year's budget, because there is some disagreement over what sort of projects should the state be funding. And again, it's a philosophical discussion that's worthy of holding, but coming late in the session like this, it does tend to cast a shadow over everything.
Well, as the budget is taking the amount of time, it is actually taking the fiscal year, obviously running out as well. One of the areas that has received a lot of attention in the budget, obviously the Peach Care funding for the insurance program for kids. How is this kind of budget stalemate impacting that?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because if you remember a month or so ago, they were warning the program will have to shut down by the end of March if we don't get more money for it. Well, it's the end of March, and they have not passed a supplemental budget that shifts the money around. It looks like Peach Care will keep going for a while, but at some point they are going to have to adopt an official budget so that they can legally move this money. Again, it adds some suspense to a problem that we've been talking about for several episodes here, and I still have no idea when they're going to resolve this, but it's still out there. It's still a problem that needs to be addressed.
People have used the term dead bills for some that didn't get through the 30th day through at least one chamber, but they're not necessarily dead. There's ways they can get through.
Well, it's never over until it's over, and we have seen in the Senate this week they have taken a lot of House bills and just added Senate bills onto the end of them as amendments and sent them back to the House. I think Lieutenant Governor Cagle said, we'll amend every House bill if we have to until we can get our stuff over there and get it heard. So when you talk about a bill that didn't make it by the crossover day deadline, you do have to keep in mind sometimes they do find a way to get those out. So, but some of the bills that did not pass, and maybe they won't come back again, are ones dealing with certificate of need. Another bill that would have had to do with guns in the workplace, with taking a gun to work in your car. That did not pass either. Bills that would have made it easier to cut trees down around billboards, didn't pass. Civil War commemoration bill fell by the wayside, and so did one on the Sunday sales of alcohol. So the odds are pretty good that those won't come up again this session, but again, I'm hesitant to say they'll never come up again, because there's always a chance.
That's true. We haven't seen again the governor's faith-based funding initiative making it through either. How are the governor's other initiatives faring this session?
He has gotten a few of them through, but a lot of them haven't made it. The faith-based funding, as you just mentioned, didn't make it. A lot of his budget initiatives got cut out by the Senate in that budget impasse that we've just been talking about. His Hope Chest amendment, on the other hand, which tries to save money and set it aside for the Hope Scholarship Program, that made it. I think his super speeder bill was also approved by the Senate. So he had a few victories, but a lot of them just didn't make it through.
When we talk about the governor, we saw him a lot right at the beginning of the session, but he hasn't been quite as involved as he was in years past. What is your take on that?
Well, he's kept a very low profile, and we have brought this up in some of our conversations with both the House and Senate leadership, which is the governor involved? Is the governor getting engaged in this? And the answer we keep getting back, more or less, is, well, no, actually he's not. He's taking the attitude that he wants the legislature to work this out among themselves and then come back to him when they have a solution. Now, that is not what past governors have done. Past governors tended to get in there and knock a few heads together if they had to get things going. But Governor Perdue has decided to, set himself apart from this, at least for the time being, and let the guys work it out for themselves.
Earlier we were talking about the Peach Care funding crisis, and one piece of legislation the governor definitely has said he supports is House Speaker Glenn Richardson's House Bill 340. It's cleared the House, and that's going to change the thresholds if it becomes law for the Peach Care eligibility.
Yes, it would, I think, among other things, make dental and vision coverage optional rather than a part of the whole package, so that people would have to pay a little bit extra to have that. It also tightens up on the eligibility standards as well, and the end result is several thousand children who today would qualify for Peach Care coverage will not be able to qualify for it if this bill passes. Now, of course, Speaker Richardson's bill has to get out of the Senate, and right now the Senate and the House aren't on very good terms, so who knows what will happen there.
The Senate passed a lot of initiatives that they had, but we've seen some bills come that are House bills over in the Senate, and the Senate has added amendments of bills that they already passed onto the House. We've seen it a lot before, but not this much. Does this show any kind of faith they have in the House passing their bills?
Well, it just may be that it indicates how deep the division is at this point. They're so afraid that the House and Senate won't be able to work out an agreement on the budget and on the other issues that they may just try to amend every bill they see coming over just out of an abundance of caution. So it's made this session a little bit different, perhaps, from some of the ones that we all have seen here in recent years.
Well, unlike last session, we haven't heard a lot about immigration reform, and nevertheless, there are some bills out there that could potentially impact immigrants.
There are a few, one of them having to do with driver's licenses, making it a stiffer penalty if you're caught driving without a license. A few others that work on the margins of some issues like car titles and things such as that. The most significant immigration legislation, I think, was the constitutional amendment to declare English to be the official language of Georgia. The intention there being to make it impossible for local governments to print documents and conduct tests in anything other than English. That didn't make it out of the House, and that is probably dead for this session. So a few anti-immigrant bills and then some that will be held over for next year.
Real quick, with the little time we have left, Lieutenant Governor Cagle had his charter school initiative passed very early in the session. What kind of chance does that have in the House?
Well, it looks like it's a hostage right now, just as Speaker Richardson's Peach Care bill is a hostage in the Senate, and I suspect that one of them will pass as soon as the other one does.
Tom Crawford of CapitalImpact.com. Tom, thanks again for joining us.
Great to be here.
It's extremely rare that the Georgia State Capitol is the site of an anti-communism rally, but that's exactly what happened earlier today. Lawmakers' Bridget Snap has that story.
Members of the Global Service Center for Quitting the Chinese Communist Party and the Epoch Times newspaper rallied outside the Capitol today to support 20 million Chinese people who have quit the Communist Party. Through editorials such as the 9 commentaries, published in 2004, the Epoch Times has endeavored to reveal what they believe is the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party and to encourage its members to publicly renounce their affiliations.
Everybody knows in China they don't have free media, they don't have any information, free flow information.
According to the speakers today, over 80 million innocent people have died in China since the Communist Party took over in 1949, and several million more have been persecuted, such as the imprisoned Falun Gong practitioners.
Now we know that those people have become the target of organ harvesting. They'll take the organ and they kill it for live, so as to have the highest, so-called highest quality, and then they will create the remains of the person.
Several rallies similar to the one held here today are being held all over the country. It is their hope to end communism in China and bring peace to their nation. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Bridget Snap.
Former Atlanta Hawk and Georgia Bulldog great Dominique Wilkins visited both the House and Senate today. Now, even though the Hawks foolishly traded Wilkins to the Clippers in '94, he kindly came back home and has been contributing to Georgia communities ever since. Senator Vincent Fort introduced the man known as the human highlight film.
He is more than just an athlete. He has contributed so much of his time on a volunteer basis on health issues, as the Lieutenant Governor said, on trying to educate the public on issues of diabetes and high blood pressure. So he's not only a great athlete, but a great citizen. I'm glad to introduce you to you Atlanta and Georgia's Dominique Wilkins.
All right. Thank you. Going in a lot of places I've been in around the country, I've never been in a state that has treated me the way this state has treated me, and there's no place I've ever been as like it. And that's why I decided to spend the rest of my life dedicating my work here in Atlanta. So again, I'd like to say thank you for all the hard work you're doing and the leadership, and hopefully we can continue to work hard as a team. So again, thank you for all your support. And also, before we go, I got something I want to give to the Lieutenant Governor. It's an authentic Dominique Wilkins jersey that we just dusted off out of the closet. So we can continue to get all you guys out to our games.
And a little Dominique Wilkins trivia for you. Even though he calls Georgia home, he was actually born in Paris, France, and his real first name is Jacques.
Very interesting. For those of you with access to the internet, you can watch Lawmakers online. Visit our website at gpb.org for more information. Click on Watch Online, then follow the instructions for watching live or looking at past Lawmakers programs in our archives. That website address again is gpb.org. Just another way we keep you apprised of what's going on at the General Assembly.
We'd like to recommend a website that's a valuable resource for information about the Georgia General Assembly. Go to www.legis.ga.gov. That website is a great research tool we at Lawmakers use on a regular basis.
Lawmakers will not be seen next week because the Georgia General Assembly will be in recess. We'll return with all the latest from under the Gold Dome on Tuesday, April 10th for Legislative Day 34. Lawmakers returns Tuesday, April 10th at 7 p.m. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in Monday morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now stay tuned for Farmer's Almanac TV. This week's episode features the Queen of Georgia and the Pumpkin Paddle. Farmer's Almanac TV is coming up next here on GPB.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 33rd Legislative Day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm David Zelski.
And I'm Wendy Lawson. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening. We'll see you on April 10th.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.